Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my latest live stream. My name's Simon Whiteley. I'm a systems safety engineer and accident analysis consultant from the UK. And today I'm going to continue on my 20th live stream, focusing on the Boeing Starliner spacecraft propulsion anomalies. And I'm going to be talking today, going through the investigation report and talking about things through the lens of STAMP, STPA and CAST. And of course, please comment below. Let me know you can hear me. Let me know that it's coming through your speakers loud and clear. And of course, if you've got any questions, comments, or you'd like to share some experience, please feel free to type in the chat. And if I can do, I'll bring it up on screen and we can talk through any questions you have. So thank you very much for watching, and let's crack on. Let's get to where we need to get to. So as I mentioned before, my intention with this this series of live streams is to put a case study together and then do a free complimentary workshop where we can get together live on Zoom and essentially go through and talk about this to your heart's content. So if you want to join that, please visit my website at whiteley-safety.co.uk. Click on this orange one just here, and then you can join a waiting list. And I will send you an email when the session is ready, after I've done all of the live streams and finished going through the report. And we can get together live together on Zoom and talk through this and answer all your questions, difficult, awkward, horrible questions as possible. And likewise, if you'd like to join my foundation training, one-day foundation training in STAMP, STPA and CAST, you're also welcome to join the waiting list for that. So visit my website and then join the waiting list. Stick your name and email address in there. When I announce the next dates, which will be very soon, I'll be sure to make you aware of that as well. So fantastic. What else can I say? Yeah, of course. And of course, if you want to have a conversation about this case study, about your issues, your concerns, either you want to have a go with STAMP or you're having problems trying to use it, then please visit my website, press I need help now, send me a message, and we can have a conversation and see how I can possibly help. Because of course a 5-minute conversation with me might unblock, many months of suffering and headbanging for you. So please don't be frightened to get in touch and let's have a conversation. So since we were this is live stream number 20, and we've actually got quite far through the report now. We are actually, pardon me, we were working on section 522 authority. We're very nearly finished that now. I anticipate we'll finish that today, and then we'll get into leadership and we'll see how far we get to by the end of the session. I do typically go for about 90 minutes, an hour to 90 minutes, depending on how exhausting it is, because it's still very hot in England, and if you notice me start to melt, that's why. It's very hot, so we're not used to it. But yeah, let's crack on. Let's keep going. So before we broke last time, yesterday, we were talking about authority, and particularly about the mission management teams, the various ones, how they are allocated roles, responsibilities and accountability, and how they interact with each other. Now, of course, it's sort of, this investigation was not done using STAMP or CAST as far as I'm aware. And so, of course, this is what, the depth that they've gone to here is, it looks really good. It's really detailed. But if you watch the previous live stream, you'll see that actually using the STAMP-based methods and thinking about things through the concept of this control loop I keep showing, you can actually go so much further. And I recommended that the stakeholders involved in this, they actually do a review of all of the plans, the management plans that are discussed here, and how those management plans respect or reflect the control structure and the control structure model, and what the interactions and responsibilities are, because this method will allow you to make those things explicit so that you can then start to spot gaps that you can then fill in. So yesterday's live stream was, out of all of them, that was a really good one, talking about leadership and management. So not so much about the technical aspects, but about the organisational aspects. So I highly recommend going back and watching Livestream 19. Fantastic. So where did we get up to? So let's start talking about observation number 2. So this is participation of upper management. So I'm highlighting, you'll have noticed I've used orange highlight a lot through the live streams. The reason I'm doing that is I'm just highlighting that these entities, these stakeholders, could be candidates for inclusion in our control structure models. So upper management conceptually will be a controller somewhere in the control structure hierarchy. Of course, this might be a generic label that represents many layers of management, many stakeholders. So we've got to think about the abstract nature of that label and what it actually refers to, make it explicit. Okay, so participation of upper management clouded the chain of command. See, chain of command. Chain of command is a term akin to control structure, hierarchical control structure. But of course, it talks about chains of command as opposed to control. But anyway, let's keep going. And created confusion as to who was responsible within respective technical areas, and the confusion was distracting misuse of resources. So yeah, absolutely. The attendance of senior leaders at the Starliner mission management teams, there we go, if I can remember that correctly, and the program control boards was driven by the desire to have access to direct relevant information. So if we take our control loop model, there we go. So the senior leaders, whether we're talking about hang on a second. Yeah, why that was. Right, anyway, yeah, so if we're talking about senior leaders, whereabouts are they in the control structure, in the control loop? And when we're talking about SMMTs, so Starliner mission management teams and program control boards, in what respect are those senior leaders? Are they senior in those entities, or are they senior leaders in other entities, and how does their position in the hierarchy relate to the responsibilities and authority of these groups? And of course, when it says driven by the desire to have access to direct information relevant to potentially contentious decisions and decision-making processes, they're sort of asking questions about, well, what feedback do they need to be able to perform their mission, do their work safely, make decisions safely? That's what that's sort of pointed at. Okay, so where were we? Let's keep going. Let's zoom in so you can see it okay. There we go. Oh, I've got somebody talking in the chat. Oh, right. It's Thomas. Hi, Thomas. Great to see you. Thank you for coming along. It's always good to see you. Thank you for joining the waiting list for the live session. It'll be fantastic to see you on there. You've got some really good experience to share. So thank you for coming along. Please, if you like, share some experience in the comments or give me some abuse. Ask me some difficult questions. That's awesome. Thank you for coming along. So where were we? So having multiple levels of authority. So there we go, talking about the different levels in the hierarchy from each technical area participating in the Starliner mission management teams and program control boards was inefficient and made it unclear who was representing the stakeholder organisations in the meetings. In some cases, participation at the agency level triggered other layers of management to feel compelled to participate, increasing the negative effects of having multiple levels of authority present. Most interview data did not find these extra participants negatively impacted the technical decisions, but extra participants did weaken the perception of authority of the Starliner mission management team, the program control board, and their associated representatives. It is important to note it also tied up agency resources for multi-hour meetings. Fantastic. So, this is something that, like I said yesterday, this could be anticipated by attempting to build the control structure model and try and understand and predefine who these stakeholders are, how they are to interact and make decisions, what information they need to be able to make those decisions, and then, of course, what the structure of these meetings needs to be, what the hierarchy and responsibility and accountability is, and then making sure that information is properly coordinated, information provision and reception is properly coordinated. Observation number 3, there was insufficient understanding of and a lack of agreement related to how to embrace the technical authority role. So there you go, technical authority. So again, just bringing you back to this this control loop, this jigsaw piece. When we're saying there was insufficient understanding, so we're talking about beliefs there. So of course, what are the different reasons why that might be? Well, it could be that there's some faulty decision making going on. It could be that there's inadequate feedback, or it could be that there's inadequate control actions or information coordination from above, from other layers, higher layers in the hierarchy. And of course, when we're talking about agreements, that implies more than one stakeholder, and they have to make decisions. They have to agree. And so what is the criteria for what is the criteria for making an agreement? And again, who or what defines the technical authority role? Is that something defined in the plans that were mentioned yesterday? So there's this, what do they call it? The plan. There we go. The mission implementation plan. So is it that document that defines those things? And again, you'll have caught me moaning yesterday about, well, these documents are called plans. It might sound really pedantic and picky, and I'm not trying to be picky for the sake of it. The point I'm trying to make is the label that these documents have, it will paint a picture in the mind of the people who see or use these documents, and it will undermine the credibility or importance of those documents. If it is a plan, as the saying goes, plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. And it's not really the plan that's important, it's the planning activity. And so if these documents, these so-called plans, contain effectively control actions and feedback information for the various stakeholders, then really should they be called plans? Should those control actions, those control structure models that are implied, should they be made explicit in formal documents that are not just plans? I know that might sound a bit pedantic, but it's not. It's not the words that I'm concerned about. It's the implication for the people who are using these documents. We should say specifically what we're talking about. What is the purpose of this document? What is it a vehicle for? Is it a vehicle for safety critical decision making? And if so, let's make those kind of things explicit. I think you know where I'm sort of coming from with that. Right, let's keep going. Where were we? We're down here. Right. So let's just move that out of the way. There we go. Right, let's get it zoomed in so you can see it. Here we go. So NASA, excuse me. And again, the reason I'm pointing this out is so you can start to develop the same thought process, the same control algorithm. So when we say NASA established, what do we actually mean NASA established? Who specifically, what part of NASA specifically established the technical authority process? And I might sound really pedantic, but it's important. When we're building the control structure model, we want to be specific. Who or what is the controller? What is their remit? What control actions can they provide? In this case, we've got a candidate controller called NASA, but it's not really specific which part. And in this case, that particular part established the technical authority process. So that's quite an important control action for all of this. And if that establishing the technical authority process and putting it into service was, is a really important safety management feature, then of course it would be interesting to know who or what did that and whether this was actually done appropriately, whether this is adequate or not. And I think from some of the conversations we've had in previous sections, this technical authority process doesn't sound as clear cut as it really needs to be based on the things that are mentioned in this report. Anyway, I'll keep going. NASA established the technical authority process as part of its system of checks and balances. Now, a system of checks and balances, doesn't that sound like a control loop to you? So providing balances and receiving checks or doing checks to provide independent oversight of programs, so that is a control process, definitely, and projects in support of safety and mission success. Fantastic, that's exactly what we want. So this is a really important part of our control structure model. The technical authority construct is central to NASA's governance, providing checks and balances that ensure, apparently, independent oversight of programs and projects. I'm sorry, but I don't agree. Based on what's in this report and the fact this incident has occurred, and that they had 2 prior test flights with lots of open actions, I agree it is central and it's important, but it does not ensure independent oversight of programs and projects, because if it did, those issues would have been addressed. Now, I'm making an assumption there that when we say they ensure independent oversight of programs and projects, that they actually do some work and the actions that they highlight, the recommendations they make, are actually dealt with and closed and not left open and accumulated as program technical safety debt. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there. Tell me in the comments what your thoughts are. The technical authority role established in response. I shouldn't laugh. The reason I'm laughing is because the technical authority role here says it was established in response to the Columbia Accident Investigation Board recommendations. Fantastic. I mean, that's great. But again, if the safety control structure had been considered for an independent, technical authority doing, providing checks and balances, if they'd have thought about that function before the Columbia accident, they would have implemented that type of structure. It took an accident and an investigation board to tell them that's a good idea. And here we are again in the aftermath of an accident talking about technical assurance and the control structure. It's still not, as robust as it really needs to be. So there are some recommendations, some serious actions that need to be taken at this level. Okay, so the technical assurance role established in response to the Columbia Accident Investigation Board recommendations in a manner consistent with NASA's existing organizational constructs is intended to guarantee that the distinct perspectives of NASA's independent engineering, safety, and medical institutions are integrated into it's easy for me to say, programmatic decision-making, and that the opportunity to formally dissent, see, that is a type of control action, everybody, is afforded to team members and adjudicated at the appropriate level. So yeah, I think what I might suggest people do is start a drinking game when they're watching my live stream. So every time I say control structure or control action, you should take a shot and see how far you get through the live stream. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's not get too carried away. Right, the technical authority process was successfully demonstrated. The technical authority process was successfully demonstrated during the CFT mission, since engineering, safety, and medical were able to provide an independent perspective and concerns, as well as having their respective recommendations considered. So there we go. Recommendations are considered. So the recommendations they make are not control actions. They are a type of a subset of control actions, you might say, but they are recommendations for consideration, not that they should be fulfilled. They could be fulfilled, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will. While the purpose and value of the technical authority were fully exhibited and appreciated by many, confusion and misperceptions relating to the technical authority or questioning of the role technical authority plays was also noted by some interviewees. Okay, so if we're talking about those many people that appreciate the technical authority, but there were some with confusion and misperceptions relating to the technical authority or questioning the role of the technical authority, that suggests that their beliefs, their mental models, their process models were not adequately updated about what the purpose of the TA was and the role of the TA. So there's a potential recommendation for that community of people, whoever they are, whatever stakeholders they are. The control structure should make sure that they understand the role of the technical authority and how that fits into things. And I think on the Livestream 19 yesterday, there was some recommendations that touched on that type of thing. So providing mandatory training. And I did moan on that live stream that mandatory training might be part of the solution, but is not the only solution. Okay, when individuals are unaware of the technical authority process, untrained in the implementation of the process, or do not fully embrace the technical authority roles and responsibility, it creates confusion and misunderstandings, and I'd also suggest it undermines trust as well. So the question about this, look, thinking about things through the control loop, just thinking about the jigsaw piece, who or what is in control of making sure that these people, these individuals, are aware of all of these things? Who is responsible for that? And are they properly resourced to do it? And are the individuals that need to know all of those things, are they properly resourced to be able to learn about all of this stuff? Because it's all right saying everyone needs to be trained, but, you know, let's be real. You know, people have got a lot of work to do already as it is. Do they have the space to be able to take this on? Does the control structure, the organization, have the space to take this on? You know, it is about complexity and managing complexity. All right, let's keep going. So where are we? As misunderstandings arise, it can erode trust between NASA organizations as well as with commercial partners and create unnecessary tension in the decision-making process. Boeing and some NASA participants demonstrated limited understanding of the role of the technical authority in mission operations, including when and how it will be applied. This contributed to friction when decisions elevated to senior NASA leadership were viewed by others as overrides. Oh, that's interesting. Viewed by others as overrides or intrusions into programmatic authority, rather than as appropriate execution of the responsibility NASA has formally delegated to the technical authorities for crew safety and mission assurance. So this is very much related to the topics we spoke about the other day, where we have these different plans. So whereabouts is it? Where is it? Am I going back too far? I think I might be. There it is, this bit here. So we have this Boeing management plan, and within it, it says that the SMD, which is the Starliner mission director, holds responsibility and authority for near real-time decisions when the flight control team determines that operating outside the approved mission plans and constraints is necessary. But that slightly conflicts with the CCP mission implementation plan that says the commercial provider are the decision-making bodies responsible for programmatic safety and risk-based decisions associated with launch countdown and major in-flight activities. And then it conflicts again with this CCP mission management team charter that says that the CCP mission management team is the approval authority of technical program decisions during real-time mission operations. And then we have this element here about NASA leadership saying that they made a formal decision on whether to return the CFT vehicle crewed or uncrewed, and that this authority comes from elsewhere. So what I'm pointing to is there's various plans for various stakeholders that place apparently explicit responsibilities and authority and accountability on various stakeholders, but there is some overlap and some gaps. And this topic we've just been talking about here, about the NASA Technical Authority, sounds like there's similar misunderstanding about the authorities and responsibilities of these different stakeholders and how they interact in the control structure. And that deficiency, is that appropriate? Yeah, deficiency, dysfunction is something that needs to be nailed down for the next launch. And as I mentioned yesterday, the way that this report talks about those various documents, and also the Dragon mission management team, the other commercial providers mission management team, I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't some common mode issues, not just in Starliner context, but also in those other commercial providers that need to go get hunted down and dealt with using the stamp-based approach. And as I said, I'm happy to get on a plane in the middle of the night and come and help and support that activity if that's what you need. So please send me a message via LinkedIn or via my website, and we can have a conversation. Formal training has been created. There we go. There's the training mentioned, and is available to address this gap. NASA's Saturn course, Empowering Technical Authority and Embracing Formal Dissent, was developed to provide employees. I'm going to point something out there. Employees, what about contractors? Are they covered in that as well? With a baseline understanding of technical authority, its origin, the distinctions between programmatic and, programmatic and technical authorities. So if you're thinking about your control structure, there's a programmatic authority and a technical authority. How do they interact with each other? Who has responsibilities for what? Who takes leadership primacy? And the role of formal dissent in ensuring safety and mission success. So I would probably highlight that formal dissent is a type of control action, or could be interpreted as a type of feedback back to programmatic technical authorities and the mission management team leadership. Okay, so the absence of consistent understanding across participating groups suggests a missed opportunity to establish a shared understanding of technical authority expectations, escalation paths, and responsibilities across both NASA and Boeing teams. I would go further than that and say it's not just a missed opportunity, it is an unfulfilled safety requirement, because that consistent understanding is absolutely fundamental to the adequate function of this control structure, and that was not happening is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. And I'm hoping these recommendations we're going to see should address that. Okay, so authority recommendations then. In fact, actually, before I start talking about recommendations, let's just zoom out a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Let's zoom in, and I'll just quickly check the chat, see if anyone's giving me any interesting comments or giving me some abuse. Everything seems to be working. Fingers crossed it stays that way. Here we go. Right. So the SOMD, the CCP, the ISSP implement a unified programmatic decision authority framework. This sounds very much like a control structure. And flow for escalation for making near real-time mission-related decisions. So this is the near real-time bit. Is there a similar recommendation necessary for real-time decisions? I don't know, maybe. Nominal mission execution, where the provider retains responsibility for executing mission activities. Hang on a second. Let's just read that again. Nominal mission execution where the provider retains responsibility. So this opens up the question about if the provider is given the responsibility based on those plans and those charters, can they have responsibility taken away from them by another entity, a NASA stakeholder? That's what this seems to imply. So who is actually in control of this mission at what time, and under what criteria does that control get handed over? So they retain responsibility for executing mission activities, including leading and coordinating anomaly resolution activities with integrated NASA participation. When deemed appropriate by NASA, or when NASA crew and NASA assets are deemed above the baseline risk, accepted by NASA at the flight readiness review, NASA shall assume leadership. There we go. So that's them basically taking control of the mission management team and any or all anomaly resolution activities with integrated provider participation. So it sounds like they wrestle, figuratively speaking, they wrestle control of the mission management team and then take over and deal with everything. I mean, is that maybe it's a rhetorical question. Maybe I'm, playing devil's advocate a little bit, but I'm challenging the assertion. If the crew commercial organization, the provider, is supposed to be in control and responsible for all of this, is it really appropriate for the NASA leadership to take that control during certain circumstances? Because that doesn't really sound like a commercial type of operation. I wouldn't expect the, I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say we've got a British Airways passenger jet and they're flying in an area that might be exposed to, certain risks, wartime risks or something. I wouldn't necessarily expect the CAA to step in and start talking, to the air traffic controller to shout at the pilot to turn around or change what they're doing. I wouldn't necessarily expect the Civil Aviation Authority to do that. Now, I know this is a slightly different set of stakeholders and players and it's in a different structure, but what I'm trying to point out here is that the control structure model for controlling hazards and responding to the occurrence of hazards and abnormal and emergency conditions, that control structure should be configured in a way that it is adaptable and make sure that the right stakeholders are in the right position and are able and capable of actually, controlling the safety of the situation. And if we're handing over the poison chalice, so to speak, mid-mission, is that really an appropriate thing we should be doing? Should we actually think about redesigning that control structure top down to really understand what it must look like to be able to enforce safety constraints on managing and controlling hazards? I mean, I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do. I'm just saying, let's go back to first principles with STAMP. What are the hazards that we need to think about? What are the system states that lead to losses that we're worried about? This one to do with inadequate control of trajectory or orientation, 6 degrees of freedom orientation. Clearly, that's a hazard the control structure should be able to prevent. And if we can't, it should be able to respond and recover from that. And I'm not sure it's such a good idea to be switching around and making the higher levels in the control structure so complex that nobody really understands what's going on. And it takes more and more time to actually deal with it. It should be slimmed down. It should be purpose designed and built. It shouldn't evolve when the incident occurs. It shouldn't, people shouldn't start marching in and taking control when things are really serious. It should be a thinned down, high performance team that knows what it's doing and can get on with it. The control structure should not evolve during this kind of high risk situation. That's something I think we should learn from this. What should the control structure look like? What safety constraints should it be trying to enforce? And then let's build it that way. Let's engineer it, architect it that way. Okay, so I've moaned about that a lot. And unified decisional authority and mission management that integrates NASA Commercial Crew Program, pardon me, and NASA International Space Station Program Mission Management Authority and execution structures. Yeah, that's what I'm recommending that they do. I think you need to, maybe not do that, but think about what that structure needs to be. And I don't mean taking the pieces we've already got with all the various labels and roles and responsibilities. I mean building the control structure from scratch to establish what control actions are necessary, what feedback is necessary, what decisions and process models, mental models are necessary, and then what does that control structure look like. And once that architecture is created, then you can start passing those allocating those responsibilities to real people, real organizations. I mean, I could talk for hours on this. I mean, this, for me, that's one of the beauties of what STAMP is all about. When you start to think explicitly, how should we design this control structure to effectively eliminate or control this hazard? And if we can't eliminate or control this hazard, regardless of the probability of its occurrence, because again, STAMP is not about probability, it's about worst case scenarios. So if we can't control this hazard for whatever reason and it occurs, what must our response and recovery control structure look like? And that will be in different sort of levels. You'll have the local technical design of the spacecraft, you'll have the administrative controls of the spacecraft operation, and then more broadly, in this case, you'll have consideration of the International Space Station as a safe haven. So how do those control structures interact with each other? And we touched on that quite a bit yesterday in Livestream 19. I recommend going back and having a look at that. Okay, so before we jump into recommendation 36, I think we've got something in the chat. So we've got Thomas is saying, let's get that up on screen. Dissent is cited. Is the dissent by Boeing employees, NASA technical authorities, or other? Dissent is typically resented by most management. That's why I'm asking if the dissent is focused within Boeing, NASA, or other. That's a fantastic point, that, Thomas. My basic layperson's understanding, based on only the content of this report, is the report doesn't seem to be clear who is providing that dissent. It seems to be talking about it from a high-level generic perspective of dissent is a topic that is important to the management of the program and the risks, but it doesn't really talk about specific examples or whether it is NASA stakeholders or Boeing stakeholders. I get the impression from the terminology it seemed to refer to the NASA technical authority related stakeholders providing dissent. But again, it's not really clear. It would be nice to know that. And I'd like to think if the investigators had used STAMP and CAST and built the control structure, they would have been able to make it explicit, which controllers, which layers in the hierarchy were providing dissent, and how that dissent was received and acted upon or ignored or dissuaded, however that sort of goes. So thank you for that comment. That's really interesting. Okay, so our number 36, recommendation number 36, develop and document specific guidelines for how a provider mission management team must respond to NASA, hang on a minute, NOM. We had this word the other day. It's NASA Operations Manager. There it is. Look at that. So you wouldn't think after nearly 40 hours these acronyms are now in my brain. It's taken ages. I'm getting old, that's what it is. There we go, NASA Operations Manager. So develop and document specific guidelines for how a provider must respond to NASA Operations Manager non-concurrence. Okay, so if we think about the control structure, let's get a little control loop, sorry. Let's get a little control loop going on. Let's steal that one. There we go. So what we're saying here is somebody, I think it's the CCP, Crew Commercial Program, so this is the Crew Commercial Program, needs to develop and document specific guidelines So they need to do some work and create some guidelines, and those guidelines need to go somewhere. And again, are they guidelines or are they a control action? Is it a guideline? Is it a control action? Is it information? Is it an instruction? Is it a suggestion? What is it? Let's be specific. If it's a guideline, then it can be ignored and overruled by the recipient. So the provider MMT must respond to NASA operations manager non-concurrence. So if this is the provider MMT, and this down here is, well, maybe not here, but over here to the provide feedback. If the NASA operations manager is providing non-concurrence, then this guidelines, is essentially defining what this provider must do, how they must respond. So what their decision making is, their control algorithm, what their beliefs are, process model are. So if they receive non-concurrence from the NASA operations manager, then what must or must not do. And similarly, process for how the NOM should adjudicate non-concurrence formal dissent from the CCP MMT. So perhaps, the NOM receives feedback or control actions from the provider MMT. Yeah, I mean, we could do with building a little model for that and making it explicit. But I'm hoping you can see the point I'm making. Gosh, it's hot. Right, let's move that out of the way. Let's zoom in a bit more. Formalize policy. So again, it's policy. Is that policy intended as a control action, or is it just nice to know information? And this. I keep banging on about this. This is why it's so important to use this model, because it helps you to ask that question. If we're going to write a policy, if we're going to write a plan, if we're going to write some, guidelines, or I don't know, what was the other one? We're going to write we're going to write a charter. Are these documents, these pieces of paper, how are they supposed to influence the controllers in the control structure? Are they just nice to know, or are they actually, these are control actions? We've decided that these are important control actions for the safety management of this program. So the vehicle that those control actions are provided should be appropriately respected and understood by the person who receives them, the team stakeholder who receives them. So when we're talking about formalizing policy for how the NASA operations manager is to include or not include inputs from the CCP officers and support organizations in readiness for the Starliner mission management teams, I mean, that policy is essentially defining the decision making of the NASA operations manager. So, if this controller was the NASA operations manager, that policy, whatever the policy that number is, it influences their decision making. It influences their control actions and the feedback they expect to receive and will collect. So again, that's quite interesting. And yes, I think it needs to be formalized, because then the NASA operations manager doesn't have to make it up as they go along. I'm not saying they do, but for argument's sake, they don't have to make it up on the day. It can be planned beforehand for all emergency abnormal situations. And of course, that policy will be applicable to all of the commercial spaceflight operators, I imagine. So there's a bit of commonality there that should be considered. Yeah, okay, so the next one, number 38. So we've got the CCP ISSP update, CCP ISSP, and provider documents and flight rules to ensure consistency and clarity with programmatic decision authority for near real-time missions related decisions. So yeah, that's the recommendation I made yesterday. But also I think you should look at real-time as well. Because if this one is not working, if this one is dysfunctional, you can almost be sure the real-time one, the real-time one might be more robust because it's real-time, and maybe the people involved in that are, much more drilled and practiced. But it would be a good idea to go and look at that as well, I would suggest. But again, this is all about documents. It's all about documents and updating documents. It's yes, the documents are important, but we can't lose sight of what is the purpose of the document. The purpose of the document is to contain information about what the structure is, control structure is, implicitly, and it should be explicitly. That's why I believe STAMP needs to become one of the core methods for doing engineering and operations design and safety analysis. But it should describe the control loop, the control structures, the interactions between stakeholders. It should describe the responsibilities, accountabilities. It should describe the control actions and the feedback, and whether they are, these are formal control actions and this is how they're specified, and these are the conditions under which they will be provided, or they are information, or they are, less direct interactions, should we say. Fantastic. Right, let's keep going. So, recommendation 40. Let's just have a quick drink. So, create mission-specific refresher information to be reviewed by programs and their support organizations just prior to flight, highlighting any residual nuances or differences in the implementation of near real-time operations. Yeah, just prior to flight might be a bit too late, I would suggest. And you could use STAMP to support that review, to highlight any residual nuances or deficiencies in the implementation of near real-time operations. And I'm hoping this last 36 or so hours of live streams shows you how you could do that. And again, like I've said before, if you do want some help with that, please reach out and we'll see what we can arrange. Ensure, number 41, ensure clarity during mission management meetings, including who has delegated authority to represent the position of various stakeholder organizations, irrespective of more senior leaders binning attendance or asking questions. So the question is, thinking about the control loop again, who or what is the controller for this? Is there an allocated person in these meetings that is going to referee and make sure that happens? Excuse me. If not, there should be. And the other point is as well, is that referee, so to speak, that referee role should not be combined with a technical hat role in that type of meeting. It's like, you might have experienced this. It's like having a safety manager and a chief engineer and then everyone else talking in the meeting. And then the safety manager is expected to organise the meeting, take minutes, organise and control the completion of the actions, and send out all the emails and meeting requests. That administrative activity should be a distinct stakeholder. It should not be given to somebody who already has important roles and responsibilities to execute. And again, it's about the design of the structure. It's about the design. How do we design our meetings to work effectively and safely? And I understand that we're resource constrained. We might not have enough of the right people and all that kind of stuff. But when you build the control structure model, it shows you what you need to be able to do these things. And if you don't have those things, it helps you put a case together to get those resources. Or it can do. Whether it's accepted or not is, separate. Thomas is trying to say something, or he's pressed the wrong button on his keyboard. That's fine, Thomas. Keep typing. Here we go. Let's keep going. So the R40. Oh, here we go. Thomas is saying something. I have to complete this program via YouTube. I hope that you find some heat relief soon. Yes, it is baking. I should put a fan on. No, thanks, Thomas. I do appreciate it. Yes, There's an entire playlist linked in this event post near the bottom. You can click on it; it'll take you to all of the videos in YouTube, and you just watch them one after the other. If you've got like 40 hours so far. But yeah, thank you. So number 42. CCP ISSP implemented targeted briefings and training sessions for NASA and provided team members on NASA's TA process, expectations and escalation paths as part of pre-mission preparation. Yeah, fantastic. You know, with hindsight, it's kind of obvious. But with foresight, if you use the control structure model, you'd be able to identify those things. Number 43, all updates need to be broadly communicated via mandatory training. Yeah, I banged on about this yesterday and on Wednesday as well. For team members. I think, this is a great recommendation, but it needs to be more specific. We need to be very specific about this. What are the updates we're talking about, and how do they need to be communicated, and in what form? Because it's not really appropriate to just say all updates and mandatory training. We need to be a bit more respectful and specific about how we do this, because everybody is very, very busy. They've got loads and loads to do. Mandatory training is going to be at the bottom of the list. Yes, it's important, but let's be real for a minute. So how could we communicate important information, update people's mental models, update process models, update decision-making control algorithms? How do we provide that information across the control structure in a form that's going to be most effective for those different stakeholders, those different audiences? Because one size does not fit all, and we should be respectful of that. Because, of course, trying to give everybody everything in mandatory training form, for some people, some organizations, that's just going to turn them off. It's going to actually undermine safety, I would argue. So this one is a nice, straightforward recommendation, but it really needs to be revisited and reconsidered, I think. It needs to be evolved. Because it's easy to say that, but how are we actually going to implement it? Number 44. Evaluate the mission management team report structures. Yeah, I banged on about this already. And titles and reference numbers through all mission phases, giving consideration to the multi-program, multi-MMT construct and decision making. Mission execution responsibility and NASA authority to ensure NASA is operating programmatically unified, even to the potential extent of the NASA Mission Directorate led and integrated activity, and verify all multi-program documentation supports the same authority structure and concept. Right, so yes, I think that's an appropriate thing to do, but that's a huge project. That's, there's potentially tens of thousands of pages of information there that needs to be considered. And then once that's been considered, it needs to be reformulated, and then it needs to be expressed as a change in all of those different programs. And like I said the other day, I highly recommend that you use STAMP to do this. I've done something very similar with my partner on the European Space Agency project that we were working on. We did something very similar to that. And so we're happy to share some experience if you want to have a conversation about it. I'm sure Issa will be up for sharing that as well in the future. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got through section 522. So let's just go, in fact, before we jump over there, there we go. So we've just done 522. So let's just stretch that down there. We've got leadership and trust to do. So leadership and trust, that's like 5 pages. Are we going to be able to get through all of that today? I don't know. Maybe. We'll see where we get to. Let's keep going for another period of time. Right. So leadership. Let's just see if anyone is commenting. Just bear with me. Let's keep going then. So 523 leadership. Another reoccurring theme emergent within interviews was challenges with leadership. Fantastic. I'm not surprised. As Jocko Willink says in a lot of his books, all problems are leadership problems. So if you're having a problem, it is a leadership problem. In some shape or form, there is inadequate leadership, inadequate control. And funnily enough, that is one of the foundation principles of what STAMP is about. STAMP is not just about identifying dangerous failures and then mitigating them and responding to them. So it's not just a failure-focused method like most of the traditional safety analysis methods like fault tree and failure modes and effects analysis and bow tie analysis. It actually treats accidents as an inadequate control problem. And so, of course, if you've got challenges with leadership, that is a instance of inadequate control in some shape or form. And it propagates through the control structure and results in inadequately controlled hazards or responses to hazards. Excuse me. So interviewees viewed the direct Starliner operational leadership as obstinate and too ready to accept risk. Oh dear. Without hearing or seeking alternative inputs. Many interviewees also felt that the CCP program management failed to facilitate disagreements effectively, allowing them to impede progress. There was a perception of bias towards Boeing, with some NASA teams observing their inputs being dismissed. Yeah, I mean that. I've been in similar situations as that a few times over the years, and it is really, really not good at all. So I can completely understand where people are coming from with that. Examples included CCP management expressing views before NASA technical teams could contribute. Oh dear, yeah, seen that a few times. I've seen it a few times where the project manager has expressed as an opinion, and because they are, their label, their role is engineering project manager. Often people hear the opinion expressed by that individual as being an engineering opinion, when it's not. It's actually a program project management opinion, which is often, often sacrifices the engineering aspect to it. And that's why I firmly believe if you have an organization that has a role of a project manager or engineering project management that tries to join those two roles and responsibilities together, it's only a matter of time before something bad happens with that type of control structure. Because somebody with those two hats on, depending on their personality and their background and their behaviors, their pressures and the way they manage stress, it is almost certain that they're going to choose program over engineering. It is very difficult to deal with that, and those roles should be separated out. No one should be listening to a project manager make engineering decisions when they are not in the position of being responsible for that. Even though they might be the world's greatest engineer, if they are not formally empowered to make engineering decisions, they really shouldn't be doing it. And if they are also a project or program manager, then again, that conflict of interest needs to be highlighted and dealt with appropriately. We shouldn't shy away from that. And I know how difficult that is. I totally understand. Okay, Boeing minimizing concerns. Sorry, expressing views before NASA technical teams could contribute, minimizing concerns, and NASA's voice being diluted in meetings. That is just absolutely crazy. But I understand how it happens and why it happens. I've been in lots of meetings like that over the years. It's not good. And as soon as those kind of things are happening, people should be raising red flags, raising the dissent flag, so to speak. And they probably would have been, I imagine. While these themes relate to leadership, additional aspects are further explored in the trust section. Additionally, interviewees consistently expressed a desire for stronger guidance from the Space Operations Mission Directorate, SOMD level of leadership. Right, so that is one of the acronyms from earlier on that I didn't recognise. So let's just make a quick note of it now, so I don't, excuse me, forget. Mission Directorate, SOMD, SOMD. Additionally, interviewees consistently expressed a desire for stronger guidance. So like I said earlier on, if SOMD are at the top and there are interviewees in the organisation below, then what are they expecting to see? You know, stronger guidance. What form is that? You know, what is that guidance? Are they control actions or are they bits of information? Are they intended to influence decision making? So what is that specifically? Particularly in relation to managing inter-organisational dynamics. That's an interesting topic. So that's if we quickly jump to our, there we go, let's put this over here so we can see it. So when we're talking about inter-organizational dynamics, so we've got communication and coordination, structure, architecture and interactions. Oh, look at that, dynamics and changes, evolution. And in this case, organization and humans, including behavior, such as complacency, perception. I could put in there, you know, dismissiveness, minimizing concerns, voice has been diluted. You know, all of those things kind of fit in there, to be fair, and then safety culture, everyone's favorite topic. So yeah, this is interesting. So enforcing a unified approach to mission governance, the overall lack of unified leadership within CCP, ISSP, programs to SOM, etc., contributed to a fragmented decision-making environment. Absolutely. Inadequate leadership, inadequate control. Leadership observations. Observation number 1. A posture of risk acceptance was communicated by crew commercial program and Boeing leadership, creating division within the large working joint team and eroded trust. Posture of risk acceptance. Yes, because if you have leadership that are give the impression, whether it's true or not, if they give the impression that they'll accept risk, you know, they err on the side of we're just going to accept it. That does scare people. That does undermine trust. It does make people very worried, and it can lead to staff turnover, difficulty retaining people, difficulty recruiting people, and especially if you have certain leaders that seem to accelerate down that path. You know, you're not sure whether they're actually of sound mind with some of the things they're saying. I mean, I'm not talking about this specific situation because I don't know, but in my own experience, there's a few experiences I've had where project managers, program managers, they seem to be like a rabbit in headlights. And so when serious issues start to crunch and grind together, they almost want to just accept anything to get it off their plate and keep moving forwards. And when somebody's behaving like that, the organisation, the people involved should recognise that and give them the support that they need to be able to deal with it. And if they're not able to deal with it, then get some extra resource in there to support them and give them, you know, appropriate coaching and everything else to be able to deal with it. If they're just not up to it because of the level of pressure and everything else, then, you know, we need some different people. Yeah, this is an interesting one, this one. I'm just wondering how the control structure should detect and respond to that kind of thing. You know, how could we prevent this in the future? How could we empower leadership to be able to manage their posture for risk appropriately and make sure everybody else is on board with it, or at least understands and respects it? This is not an easy thing to do. This is very challenging, and especially if you've got very strong individuals. I mean, if you're familiar with personality profile testing, there's one. Well, there's MBTI, Myers-Briggs personality profile. I can't remember what TI stands for. And some people, it's not particularly academic. Some people like it, some people don't. And all I'm saying is there's some interesting ideas to be thought about. Not necessarily we should trust the method. And then there's one that I'm familiar with called DISC, DISC, which is dominance, influence, stability, and compliance. Red, yellow, green, blue. There's a book called Surrounded by Idiots, funnily enough. There's a whole series of books around that topic by a Swedish chap. I can't remember. I think Ericsson, I think his surname is. I can't remember. If you look it up on Amazon, Surrounded by Idiots, great book. And he introduces the concept that sits behind DISC. And essentially, if you have somebody is a high influencer, high I, so to speak, they're very much about people and feelings as opposed to the task, deliverables, and activities. And so if you have a high dominance and a high influence person, you can get a lot of potential conflicts because the dominance person is very much about the task and getting the task done and mission focused, whereas the influencer is the high I is very much about the people in the organization. And quite often, in my experience, a lot of the project managers I've met over the years, most of them are typically high influencer type people, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that how they work in the organization and how others interact with them, we need to understand and respect those profiles so that they can be put in the right position and empowered to be able to do things and remain effective and maintain trust. I could talk about this for hours. I'm going to keep going. I should maybe write a book, the tales from the crypts of safety engineering projects on complex programs. How to deal with project managers and safety managers, how to be a good safety engineer. Not that I would know. Anyway, let's keep going. So during the mission, CCP and Boeing operational leadership consistently conveyed a position of risk acceptance and readiness to undock. I mean, if that's wishful thinking, fantastic, but we need to make everyone aware that's what we're aiming for. But if we can't do that, it is okay. We will do something else. We will be adaptable no matter what happens. We will deal with it, which many perceived as premature and dismissive. Yeah, so that's, of unresolved technical concerns. This was particularly apparent regarding the service module, reaction control system, thrust at anomalies. This posture gave the impression that completing the sortie was prioritised over thorough assessment of crew safety risks. Yeah, I mean, that's a big issue. That I wonder how these teams were coordinating and talking to each other. I wonder if there was open conversations or whether it was very adversarial. Because when people start to get stressed, they do, resort to their adjusted personality profile. And if they feel threatened or scared or stressed, of course, they could, flight, fight, freeze, fawn response. Was it fight or flight responses going on here? How was that dealt with? I'm sure there's some human factors and psychologists listening to this that will know all about that stuff and be thinking about psychology of organizations and leadership. Okay, so there we go. So one interviewee noted, people said, why bother? He is driving in one direction, and that's what he wants. Right, that one statement is very interesting because it sounds like we're talking about a singular person, a male in this case, presumably, who is in a keystone part of the control structure, and their behaviour is having an effect on the team and their level of trust and collaboration and cooperation. So does this leader know? Do they know that that's the effect that they're having? Has somebody given, a critical friend given them feedback? That's one of the things I suggest. All senior leaders should have a coach, a personal coach to support them and make sure they can see get a reflection on themselves and their behaviours and how they relate to other people. I mean, I personally have a couple of different coaches for various things, and I absolutely swear by coaches. I am a trained coach myself, having coached many masters and PhD students and others in the dark arts of stamp, STPA, and cast. But I think having a coach, if you think about the control structure, actually, in fact, I'll just do this now while I think about it. The topic of coaching and why it's critical in my opinion to have a coach. So if you imagine this as the leader, and they are doing things that are undermining the trust of everyone in the program. If you had, there we go. If you had a coach that was on the side, there we go, bold. There we go, coach. And that coach was, I could draw on this. I've got a pen. I could do this with a pen, couldn't I? Actually, no, I'll use an arrow because it looks cleaner if I do that. So if you have a coach listening to what's going on, and then they provide feedback to the coachee, in this case, there we go. So if they're receiving feedback and hearing what's going on with the coach and providing the coach with coaching and helping them reflect and update their beliefs and their decision making, that means that they can be a better controller, a better leader. And of course, if the relationship is just between the, why is it not doing that? If it's just between the controller and the coach, then of course the coach is not going to get the feedback about what's actually going on from elsewhere. So it's important to have double loop. So you've got feedback from what's going on down here to the coach, but also the coach getting feedback about the leader themselves. So I highly recommend that. Everyone should have a coach, but especially leaders, and especially leaders in very challenging safety critical environments such as this, because that'll keep them from burning out. It'll keep them working to a good standard, and they won't crash or blow up or hopefully make too many bad decisions. And if you'd like to know more about coaching, I'm happy to talk about that as a separate topic. I think it is absolutely critical. All the best high performers have coaches of different types for different areas that need to be improved. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Right then, let's keep going. So some interviewees also mentioned the shuttle operational background of the SMTT chair, the NOM, the NASA operations manager, and the crew commercial program manager, and the possible preconceived notion that accepting risk to return the vehicle and crew was the only real path forward. Okay, that's interesting. Excuse me, this mirrors decisions made for the shuttle when no safe haven in low Earth orbit or alternative return capability was available. Right, okay, so is it that their background, their past beliefs and experience and decision-making control algorithms is shaped by that experience, and they didn't pay enough attention to the fact that there is an option for a safe haven and an alternative return capability? That's very interesting. That is very interesting. This forward-leaning approach led to a breakdown in open dialogue. NASA institutional stakeholders, including the ISSP, FOD, and technical authorities, felt their input was undervalued or ignored, requiring governance intervention. Right, so that explains potentially why NASA took control of the situation. So I was talking earlier on about, where is it? Yeah, so I was talking about them taking over control. Where is it? There we go, that's it. NASA shall assume leadership of MMT and any or all anomaly resolution activities, and it's when deemed appropriate. So maybe that was an initiator of a takeover. I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll keep going. That's what it sounds like. To ensure additional data analyses occurred before a final crew return decision, the perception that CCP leadership had formed a position before hearing all the viewpoints created organizational silence, resistance to collaboration, and stagnation in decision making. Yes, and these, you definitely don't want that when you've got people in orbit where time is potentially ticking down. Strong personalities. There we go. Look. What was I saying? I wonder what their personality profiles are. Within CCP and Boeing were seen as overly optimistic in presenting data, which some interviewees interpreted as lobbying rather than objective analysis. This dynamic discouraged dissenting views and contributed to a growing sense of distrust. As one interviewee described, opposing positions felt like pushing a rock uphill. Yes, I've been there many times, and it is not nice. It is not nice at all. And what adds insult to injury is you're trying to do the right thing, and then they terminate the contract, and so you're basically out of the job, no money when you were trying to do the right thing. Yeah, so I understand that. I understand that to the deepest of my core. The situation improved later in the mission when key personnel changes were made. Oh, fantastic. Key personnel changes were made within the Boeing team, and there was a collective recognition that senior leadership should have played a more active role in facilitating respectful engagement across different perspectives. You know, I'm really, really pleased that this report has been done and the investigation team has gone to this level of detail, because shining a light on this kind of stuff, there'll be other people, watching this, people like me, people like you, that will see this and will be like, yes, it's not just us. It's not just us being gaslit. This kind of stuff does go on, and it happens in a lot of organizations, especially when the stakes are really high. And we are all humans. We have to be humble. We have to reflect that we have limitations, and sometimes we can behave inappropriately and under pressure and all that kind of stuff. But let's not point fingers and be too negative about it. Let's treat this as the golden opportunity it is to learn so much more, so that we can benefit ourselves in the future and prevent, or at least manage, this kind of stuff going on in the future. These changes allowed for a more productive conversations regarding the technical qualification campaign of the hardware, and testing at the White Sands test facility. The lack of early intervention, to address team dysfunction allowed conflict to overshadow mission objectives, and a delayed consensus on critical decisions. Yeah, that kind of stuff happens a lot. Observation 2, early continual undock planning by the SMMT chair at the beginning of the mission distracted from anomaly resolution. Again, this goes back to how is the control structure designed for the things it needs to deal with. So in this case, we need to do some undock planning. So the control structure should be designed and resourced to do that. But we also need to do some anomaly resolution. So the control structure should be designed and resourced to do that. If we're trying to do all of these things with one control structure, we're not going to do it very well, and we might end up causing ourselves more serious problems later on. The continual undock planning added pressure to proceed in nominal undock during a major anomaly resolution process. This further divided the team into factions and drove premature discussions regarding risk acceptance and preparation for return. Yeah, absolutely. So those conversations that, the way this should be laid out, there should be some form of Gantt chart, a plan that shows what these decision activities need to be and what the dependencies are to make sure that things are properly sequenced and that they don't get out of kilter. Excuse me. Many interviewees felt this tactic was an extension of the pre-flight Boeing pattern to plan for launch in an unrealistic time frame, driving decisions centered around the date for the dynamic event rather than the technical readiness to proceed. Now that is very interesting. And the interesting word they've used is tactic. So when I was talking about project managers earlier on, this is the kind of nonsense that safety managers have to sort of try and deal with as well. You've got a team or somebody that is either doing this on a purpose and doesn't understand the implications of what they're doing and the negative impact on the team, or they are just driven by the program and they don't care what the dates are, just as long as they've got a date in a spreadsheet or a slide pack, and that they're just going to keep, head down, focusing on the dates. That kind of behavior is bloody dangerous and expensive in complex programs such as this. I'm not saying that team or those individuals are behaving like that, but this is the kind of nonsense I've had to deal with, so I completely understand. And it is dangerous. It burns out the team, it wastes valuable time and resources and energy, and it just undermines the project, undermines the trust amongst everybody. It needs to be, there should be a recommendation for dealing with that. Get an angel and a devil on the shoulder of the various senior leadership and make sure those devils and angels talk to each other. Observation 3, the SOMD leadership did not identify the need for a coordinated multi-program solution space. The team needed to define time constraints for problem solving, link impacts across both programs, and evaluate options in terms of their relevance to Starliner alone or across multiple providers. This observation is an additional portion to 04, observation 4, in the process section, and observation 1 in the authority section, which emphasizes the need for an overarching process to be triggered by govern multi-program anomalies, triggered by and govern multi-program anomalies. Multiple interviewees mentioned a need for stronger guidance from SOMD. So that's already been said earlier on, stronger guidance from SOMD. So where was that mentioned? Stronger guidance. There we go, stronger guidance. Specifically, some interviews highlighted that SOMD leadership was reactive rather than proactive. Did not appear to help manage inter-organizational dynamics and did not enforce a unified approach to mission governance. Okay, so my recommendation is that entity is included in the control structure model, and then it is explored, well, why is it behaving that way? What needs to change? Yeah, I think there's a lot that could be said about that particular stakeholder because they sound like they provide a very important function, especially from a coordination and a coordination perspective. Okay, so observation number 4. Interviews identified a need for program managers to directly communicate more effectively and more visibly with each other to provide clear and unified direction to their teams. Fantastic. Leadership. Inadequate leadership. Team members felt singularly responsible for integrating the program managers and putting together a unified direction for how to proceed. A healthy tension and a healthy working relationship existed between most CCP and ISSP direct counterparts. Despite tensions, ISSP and CCP successfully coordinated on critical operational aspects such as... So they definitely need to be in the control structure model. Extending Starliner's stay on station, conducting on-orbit thruster testing, planning for alternative crew return options, e.g. via SpaceX. These actions demonstrated functional integration, even amid cultural and structural challenges, including not understanding if the program managers were on the same page, or even talking about the options and overall consequences for both programs. Okay, so going back to our little jigsaw piece, hopefully you won't get tired of me talking about that all the time. So if you have a program manager for ISSP and a program manager for CCP, they have some beliefs, and this little note here, program managers were on the same page. That's essentially making sure they share mental models. They have the same belief or understanding about a situation or context. Fantastic. Right, observation number 5. Ineffective communication styles, including times of unprofessional behaviour and language, culminated in dysfunctional team dynamics. Yeah, there we go. Although ineffective communication was not observed in every meeting, there were enough instances of frustrating and or unprofessional communication styles being exhibited and tolerated. I'm not highlighting that as in green, that's good. I'm highlighting it because that's important. So if it's tolerated, why was it tolerated? What's going on there? There's something interesting going on. Did the other attendees not feel they were able to deal with that? Were they scared of consequences, perhaps? Interesting. As part of the culture of decision making, multiple interviewees brought the subject up without prompting. Numerous interviewees mentioned defensive, unhealthy, contentious meetings during technical disagreements early in the meeting. The recommendations for conducting more productive meetings and that support structure can be found in the process section. This is included here to specifically reflect leadership challenges and to provide a picture of the cultural environment for which the mission was being conducted. Individual interviews reported instances such as yelling in meetings. It was emotionally charged and unproductive. I stopped speaking up because I knew I would be dismissed. Flipping heck, yep. If you weren't aligned with the desired outcome, your input was filtered, out or dismissed. I heard them berate the safety engineers off muted mics. Wow. It was probably the ugliest environment that I've been in. Yes, I can certainly understand that, having been in more ugly environments than good environments over the years. We were told our questions were inappropriate, but there was no other forum to ask them. Yeah. That point goes back to 2 or 3 live streams ago when they talk about the way meetings were sort of smashed together and amalgamated, and the roles and responsibilities of the different meetings was kind of overlapped and gapped, and things were lost or dropped. That's what that's referring to. So, of course, I would recommend any meeting agenda that you have a section at the bottom of your meeting agenda that says literally what questions or concerns do attendees have that have not been covered or cannot be covered by this forum and need to be escalated elsewhere. That is such an on your agenda for all your meetings, I would recommend having that as an agenda item. And at the outset of the meeting, set the scene and say, this is how it's going to be run. This is the expectations of the attendees. We're not going to put up with this kind of bullshit, yelling and swearing and dismissing people and berating people. That's not going to stand. And anybody who's behaving like that will be asked to leave, and their managers consulted. We need to make a safe environment for people to be able to speak up, and maintaining that is so critical. We were told our questions were inappropriate, but there was no other forum to ask them. It's not an environment that is inviting to dissenting opinions. That is a safety constraint. The environment must invite dissenting opinions and respect the person communicating them, and also do something about it. Not just, oh, well, thanks for that, and then just don't do anything. There are some people that just don't like each other very much, and that really manifested itself during the CFT. Yeah. I've been in a few meetings like that over the years. They treat me as a joke. Yeah, that's ridiculous. There wasn't a clear path for conflict resolution between the teams. That led to a lot of frayed relationships and emotions. And I would guess that one of these interviewees would also have said, and I think they touched on it earlier on, where they just stopped. Where is it? I stopped speaking up. So this here is incredibly sad. But what it means is that potentially issues that, the feedback is not being provided to leadership. So, if leadership are behaving in a way, control actions, behaving in a way that stops people wanting to speak up, even if they ask for the feedback, they're just not going to get it. And they're never going to get it. And with all the time that they don't have that feedback, and they don't know, or they would be naive to think that they don't know, that they're not getting that feedback, things can be escalated until something really bad happens. So this is a delicate balance that has to be maintained. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm just looking at the clock. It's now 19:32 local time. So what I'm going to do is I think we'll pull stumps there, and we'll come back to this. I'll set some more dates for next week. In the meantime, visit my website, join the waiting list for the free workshop. If you would like some foundation training, please click the link and join the waiting list for the foundation training. And of course, if you need some help, you want to have a conversation, if there are themes that I've been talking about today that really, bother you, and you just want somebody to talk to, I'm happy to talk, have a conversation, over a cup of tea or whatever it is, just to get those things off your chest. Because I've been through a lot of things over the years myself, so I'm in a good position to be able to talk about that type of challenge. And it is one of the reasons I have had coaches in the past, because they've helped me to unpack a lot of this nonsense and stuff I've had to deal with over the years. That's really affected my ability to keep going in safety. So if you want to talk about those things, you can send me a message and let's have a conversation. Don't suffer in silence, so to speak. Right, well, it's been great to see you. Thank you for coming along. I really appreciate your attention. As I say, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and keep an eye on for the next dates for the next live streams, because let's just quickly zoom out. So we are at page 138, 140, say, and the whole report is 311 pages, 312 pages apparently. So we are almost halfway through. So in another sort of, 20, 30 hours, it should be done. So yeah, let's keep going. Fantastic. Right. Thanks for watching, and I will have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week sometime. Take care.